What is up, guys? TD here, bringing you our duo guide for Alysrazor, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, in Firelands. If you haven't watched any of my other videos I posted up about Firelands, forewarning, we had never done Firelands before. This, going into these fights, was our first time, so it's a little rough. But this fight was a little bit more complicated than the couple fights before it. When you start off, she'll drop these feathers on the ground that you can grab 3 of, and it will give you a buff that allows you to fly, which comes in handy for getting up in the air and avoiding the stuff on the ground and DPSing her, and is the only way to DPS her as she's up in the air if you're a melee fighter. When you start, she'll constantly have these blazing talon initiates fly in, and they'll cast brush fires and pyroblasts and all kinds of fun stuff that you need to stay out of. Get out of the fire, get out of the fire, why are you in the fire? Also, she lays these eggs, which drops voracious hatchlings that do a lot of damage, but they also will imprint, as it's called, on somebody, which gives you quite a bit of a damage buff, so you do want to use that damage buff to your advantage. I think it's like 1000% damage buff. It's really high. But the thing is these hatchlings do a ton of damage, and when they imprint on somebody, you can't taunt them, you can't do anything to get them off that person. So they have a mechanic that if they don't eat, they get unhappy, and it will cause them to throw tantrums, which also increases their damage and can kill you. And the only way to make them happy is to drag them over these little fire worms that pop up out of the ground. If you drag them over top of them, they'll eat them, and they'll get a buff that they're happy, and they won't have a chance to throw the tantrums anymore. So basically, if you're on the ground on this fight, you will be doing a lot of running, consistently running these guys over top of the worms to keep them happy, and chasing down the blazing talon initiates and killing them, and staying out of the fire on the ground, and then killing them off. For this fight, I let them stay alive so that I could keep the damage buff. I didn't know at the time if you kept the damage buff after they died, or if it instantly went away, or how any of that worked. So I just kind of kited them around and let them stay alive until it got to the part where Alysrazor comes down, or starts the big firestorm, which should be coming up here pretty soon. You can see that tantrum is pretty nasty. I start taking a lot of damage when they throw a tantrum. Alright, entering phase 2, starts this giant firestorm, which is kind of crazy. There's giant fire tornadoes swirling everywhere, and you just kind of gotta dip in and out, side to side, to try to get out of the way. And if you still have these blazing talon initiates up, you need to make your way around and finish them off. And then once you enter phase 3, she does a dive bomb, and right now she has a debuff where she's taking an additional 50% damage, so you want to pop some cooldowns, get some damage in on her. And some of these blazing talon claw shapers fly in. They channel into her, which reignites her and gets her back up off the ground. So we tried to interrupt them as much as we could. That way, I'm assuming if you interrupt them, it takes her longer to fly back up, and therefore the more damage you can get in on her. Again, this is our first time, so we're just theorizing here. Phase 4, it seems, is just her attacking. She has a fire buff that does damage to everybody. It does quite a bit of damage, nothing crazy, but crazy for level 90. So a little bit of self-healing should be enough to keep you up, and then it's back to phase 1 all over again. Your secondary DPS can grab some feathers and fly back up and stay on Alysrazor, while your tank style, whatever. Depending on your group composition, a lot of people do double DPS or whatever works for them. We've just found, you know, Blood Death Knights tend to be one of the best classes to do solos, so they're also one of the best classes to do duos. And Elemental Shaman, no, she just loves her Elemental Shaman. But they are a good class too, because they do quite a bit of damage, and they have off healing, and of course, heroism, bloodlust, and all that good stuff. So, you can see we're back to phase 1. We've got the hatchlings out. They're imprinting, trying to drag them over top of the worms so that they won't throw tantrums, taking down the Burning Talon initiates around, and trying to stay alive. The worms also, you can see the worms do a constant channel of fire that does actually a lot of damage, so you don't, while you're dragging the birds over top of them to eat them, you want to make sure you don't run through that torrent of fire, or you're probably going to take a lot of damage. And you keep kiting them around and just watching out for all the brush fires and all that good stuff. It's a bit hectic. It, you know, requires you to just pay attention to what's going on around you, making sure that you see where there's worms at so you can kite them over them. And like I said, when they imprint, you can see they're totally ignoring me now, even though I have like 1200% threat on them. They don't care at all about me because they imprinted on her. But one thing that you can do is actually, when you fly up with the feathers, they stop attacking you. So if they do both imprint on your second person like they just did right there, they can get the feathers and fly up, and that's a good way to escape. Because if they are a caster type, you know, squishier class, they might not be able to survive having two of them on them, especially if they both throw a tantrum. And making good use of the DPS increase buff to take them down. You can see those nice 600k non-crits from that damage buff as a tank. Back to phase 2, the giant firestorm. Avoiding fire tornadoes of death and killing Blazing Talon initiates. Back to phase 3. Some of your cooldowns should be lesser cooldowns should be back up. Go ahead and blow them and try to do some extra damage. Interrupt the ignite on the Blazing Talon Claw Shapers, which I could have been doing damage on Alysrazor at the same time, but I was mainly trying to focus on interrupting the ignition to keep her on the ground longer. And back to phase 4, and the second she got to phase 4, she died. So, awesome! Thank you guys for watching. Thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you aren't already. And we will be getting the rest of these bosses up as soon as possible.